outward, arranging the old or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden, the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very of God. Former times, the holy women had also adorned this of their own husbands, obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. Likewise, our husbands likewise dwell to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Let's go back to the theme so we can establish where we are. Again, the theme of 1 Peter that we're using is the hope, the living hope that we have. We have three divisions of this in the first letter of Peter. We see hope defined as the chapter opens, verses 3 through 12. Then we see the hope displayed, chapter 1, verse 13 through chapter 4, verse 6. That's where we are. And in this hope displayed, we get to see hope lived, put on display in front of everyone. And then finally, chapter 4, verse 7 through chapter 5, verse 11, hope defended. So, we're in the middle of this discussion of the display of hope. The display of hope that we have been noticing. Holiness is the goal. Obedience is the course. And our section is influence is the effect. Influence is the effect. So I want us to think about the influence that is behind the admonitions given here. And as we look at them, notice the individual situation in which we have this text laid out for us, and we need to understand it well. Let's begin in verse 1 with the word likewise. To what does that word refer? Likewise.
Previously, we were discussing employer-employee relationship or master-slave relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, I kind of hate to use the term master-slave, especially in the context, but
Right.
But employer-employee, not possibly. I mean, it's just someone who is in partnership as far as doing the work that needs to be done.
What you are saying, and I think this is what the text is talking about, is likewise the role that you have. Your role is, and everybody has a role, no matter what, and that's what we're doing. Mike? Yes. 2.
Where servants be submissive to your masters, and this is why I teach submission.
I think he's talking about that because the role does when we talked about the master-slave situation, did we say that in the eyes of God the master is better than the slave? That's not what he's talking about, right? So he's talking about the quality of the person. He's talking about the role in which you find yourself.
I think that we need to look no further than Christ.
Right.
Made himself servant and subject himself to the cross. You know, we all need to think of ourselves as servants rather than someone that deserves something. You know, we're not the Lord of gentry. We're the servants. We don't deserve salvation, but we can have salvation because Christ is willing to make himself a servant.
Mm-hmm. I think that you're right. I think the word likewise seems to me to be built upon chapter 2, the phrase in verse 23, he committed himself. Whatever role a person finds himself or herself to have, the question is, are you committed to it? Jesus was committed to his role, and therefore, likewise, each of us should be committed to our roles. And that's what he's talking about in this text. Now, Go ahead.
Jesus being committed to his role. And I'm not sure me and you agree on this, but the verse in the Bible where it says he thought it not robbery to be equal with God.
Yes.
I've always felt like that the meaning behind that was he didn't think he was taking anything that he didn't deserve, being equal to God.
No, you're exactly right. We agree on that. The only thing that I would add is the word, it's an unfortunate rendering of the word robbery there, Philippians 2. The word actually is, he did not consider being on equality with God a thing to be held on to. That's what it actually says.
But the point is that it's an acknowledgement that he was equal to God.
That's exactly right.
And yet he did put himself in subject to God.
And that is the point of this whole passage. That's my point that I'm making. You're exactly right. Everything he's talking about here, are the people in government better than the people who they govern? No. In fact, usually it's the opposite way around right now, I think. Okay? So the people in government are at least equal to the people whom they govern, and vice versa. As it relates to God, aren't servants and masters equal? Absolutely. Isn't it the case that husbands and wives are equal? Absolutely. Well, he's not talking about inequality. He's not talking about who's better than another. He's only talking about the role in which you find yourself. You, likewise, as Jesus did, commit to it.
You're all a lot of sheep going astray.
Yes.
Turn to the shepherd. That's one of the prettiest verses in the whole
It is.
We're all going astray, and now we've made ourselves in subjection. We got back with the master who's going to take care of us completely. And likewise,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right, let's keep moving. Now, notice how this influence that we're talking about, 1 Peter chapter 3, those of you who just came in, we're in 1 Peter chapter 3. We're talking about the display of hope through the influence that we can have by living the hope as it's been given to us. And in this passage, notice how that influence immediately makes itself known. That even if some do not obey the word, they, without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives. There is what I think he is saying, make sure there are times when you have to understand what not only the text is saying, but also what it is not saying. Notice what it is not saying. The text is not saying, wives, don't say anything to your husbands. It's not teaching that, right? So, and that becomes important as we move on down through this text. Just because it says that they may be won without a word. He's not saying, wives, don't say a word. Keep your mouth shut. Don't ever talk to your husband if he's not a Christian. Don't do it. In fact, Scripture would teach us that the exact opposite would be true. It is your job as a Christian wife, if your husband is not a Christian, to teach. But what he is emphasizing in this text is the power of a quiet lifestyle, the power of a meek and gentle spirit, the power of a woman who lives in a committed situation the way that he is discussing this. And so he's saying, when you live this way, your conduct will make an influence in his life. Now, I hesitate, but it has to be at least brought up. I do not believe that God says anywhere in Scripture that a Christian should never be married to a non-Christian. The Bible doesn't teach that. Sometimes we make these comments, and this is what we've always thought or been taught. And someone made a comment to me recently and talked about being unequally yoked, talking about marriage. Well, it's not. That passage doesn't even discuss marriage, not about marriage. It's about forming relationships with non-Christians that can dominate you to where you can't be a Christian anymore. Now, it may include marriage, possibly, but it is not about, the passage is not a text about marriage. Number two, in the first century, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul would write about these marital relationships, and he talked about a believer married to an unbeliever. He never did identify in that situation, never did he say that it is a sinful relationship. In fact, he says, if the unbeliever is willing to stay with you, great, stay with them. But if it's a sinful relationship, they should have gotten out. So to say that a Christian should never be married to a non-Christian is not scriptural teaching. However, we also need to teach, I think we need to teach our young people that Christianity or that marriage should not be viewed as a mission field. Marriage should not be viewed as a situation that says, you know, I want to go and marry this person who's not a Christian so I can convert them. Now, though God does not oppose that kind of a marriage, we need to teach our young people that marriage is important. Marriage is difficult no matter how much you have in common. Would married people agree with that? Y'all agree with that? Those that have a whole lot in common, those of us that have a whole lot in common, would you say marriage is difficult? Yeah, do I hear the amen? Yeah, everybody. If you didn't say it, you're lying. All right? Now, number two, if you have major differences, it gets even tougher. It really does. And this is a major difference. And so, I don't know that we should discourage, prohibit, hinder that marriage. I know preachers who will not perform marriages if it's between a Christian and a non-Christian. Well, I don't believe that. I won't refuse that. And even though we should not be keeping that from happening, I don't think we should glorify it as the greatest thing a Christian can do to marry a non-Christian and see them obey the gospel. Because, in my experience, my time, far more Christians have left the faith than have non-Christians come to the faith. That's been my experience.
Instances where they're addressing one believer married to a non-believer, that the believer was converted.
Yeah, it was for sure. And I think that certainly that is one of the issues going on there in 1 Corinthians 7. They were non-Christians and one of them obeyed. Now we're in a situation. I agree with that. But I still say that the situation was not set up as identifying it as a sinful relationship. It can produce a sinful situation if we're not careful. That's very true. Yeah. But that's good reminder on that 1 Corinthians 7 passage. Now, absolutely.
I mean, here's where I stand, and then you certainly have to think about children.
Yep.
Do we want children? Not maybe this person doesn't want children. And certain finances that we can't live like this if we make this, and I think sometimes people go in those relationships with the wrong ideas, and they think that I can fix all of these things with this other person. And they must have to listen to voices.
Those are three very good things, and I think that's a list of a few things. But I tell you what, in my experience, the number one thing is the idea of your relationship with God. For this reason, if you don't fix that, and you have a strong person in this religious faith and a strong person in this one, when the children come along, what are you going to do? You're going to have a divided home, very likely. That's not good.
And I have known women personally. I know for a fact They were good, but they were not allowed to go to church because of maybe the deacons or maybe the threat of kill from those are real facts.
It happened.
It happened.
Maybe not much as in our time as it has in the past, but yes. So the point is that we need to be careful about this marriage relationship and entering into it with our eyes wide open. And that's why in our premarital stuff, these are things that we always talk about and deal with. Now, notice this. If some do not obey the word, the literal meaning of that is if they remain a heathen. That's what it means. That's what it says. They can remain a heathen. So he is setting this thing up in a way it doesn't feel good. Because even if this person is a heathen, what did you do? You married him. But then you say, well, but he wasn't a heathen when I married him. I understand that. People change. I get that. But just because that happened doesn't give you freedom to say, since you changed, now you're a heathen, you're not treating me right, that I'm going to run find me another one. The Bible doesn't teach that. Because why? You want to win them by the conduct. The word may be won literally means that you may gain them. You may gain them. When they observe your chaste conduct. You probably heard it used this way before. Every woman should be chaste, but not necessarily chaste. Right? C-H-A-S-T-E, C-H-A-S-E-D. Depends on the difference. Chaste behavior creates one kind of interest. But other kind of behavior might create chaste. And the idea is you want to be this vision, picture, this display of spiritual life. Get into this very difficult passage, part of it. Remember we said that when the text said, without the word, the husband may be won. He was not saying in that, don't say anything. This next passage uses that same setup. Do not let your adornment be outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel, but rather let it be. He is not saying, in the same line of discussion, he's not saying, don't ever wear any of these things. He's not saying to women, if you're a Christian, you can't have your hair cannot be arranged. He's saying you can't wear gold and you can't put on apparel. Now, I don't know what your versions say, but in the New King James, the word fine is in italics, which means it's not there. It means put on apparel. Yeah. Now, that's just not, that's antithetical to Christianity if women just can't wear clothes. Not very, yeah, we'll be chaste. We're back to that chaste and chaste thing now. Yes, that's right. Yes, ma'am. Probably is. I'm sure you're right. And all I know is clothing. I got no idea about fashion.
Everybody probably knows that I like different textures of fabric, and I play around with fabric. One of my favorite shows on TV is Project Runway, and I record every season and watch it over and over again. And if you will, and one of the things that they said is, that looks like clothing. This is fashion. And the difference between the two is remarkable.
And what would you, in a nutshell, describe the difference?
Well, fashion is not always modest.
Okay. The clothing is considered to be.
I mean, in the
Yes.
in the design
Sure.
world and all this kind of thing, clothing is modest.
So you would say that we could identify it as clothing is acceptable in a general way, and fashion may or may not be, depending on where it heads in that culture.
Well, it trickles down.
Mhm.
If just think back a few years ago,
Mhm.
girls started showing their belly button.
Right.
They started showing their bottoms.
Right.
This
Tells you something.
This is a filtering down.
Sure it is.
process.
Sure it is. Yeah, you're exactly right. Now, what he is saying here, because a lot of women have, some religious groups take this to be literal, that you can't, as a Christian, do any of this. But I find it fascinating, that that same group has the women put their hair up. Now that looks arranged to me. This says don't arrange your hair. Well, you know what non-arranged hair is when you get up in the morning, right? We're thankful that all of you ladies arrange your hair in some fashion, you know. The point that he's making, don't ever forget the point. The point he's talking about is the inward person, verse 4, this incorruptible beauty. The word arranging there literally means to inweave, where the women would at this time take to display their riches, put their hair in a way, and then weave gold strands or whatever all around, and the most elaborate, trying to make a point that I am at the top of the heap. And he's saying, women, we're not doing that, not in a Christian way. I made a note to myself here that I had forgotten. My note is that in the Greek, there is no word for the word apparel or putting on. I wonder now, I didn't look at it again after I went through it, how that works. What other renderings in that? Didn't he have other versions at the end of verse 3? Yes, well, I have that as well. I'm looking at the end of the apparel thing. Does anybody have a different word other than apparel? Clothing you wear. Okay. So it's an implied thing, apparently, here. And he's talking about this inward, gentle, quiet spirit, precious in the sight of God. Now,
I don't really think he's condemning this.
He's not.
He says, do not let it be merely.
Well,
Don't let it stop at this. I mean, everyone wants to try to look the best they can, but that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
That's the beginning. If you really want to appear as you should before God, you'll be concerned with the inner man even more than the outer.
The translators understood the meaning behind this text by inserting the word merely as an italicized word. Yes. Yes, it's been inserted. Yeah. But that's the sense of the passage. Yes.
The phrase adorning is, if you look up the definition of it, it says make attractive.
That's it.
So, when I look at this passage, I think of, the natural beauty is what he's trying to emphasize.
And where does that start?
It starts in, believing in yourself,
Inside out. That's right.
inside.
That's very good. That's exactly what he's talking about.
This verse is always interesting just from the point of view of what do we dress up for the most normally? Church.
Probably.
This is what I tend to put the most effort into my appearance is for church. I know all the reasons why and how tradition is, but it just makes me think of all the people who church is an appearance. You look
That's
at
true.
church to put out
It does seem to be. You're exactly right. And I think that was part of what he was dealing with here as well, when these Christians would assemble together, because you had all classes of people from rich to poor. And we find this in Corinthians when he talks about how they were abusing the Lord's Supper by the rich people, bringing stuff and eating and having a meal out of it and leaving the poor people out. So you have those kind of situations going on.
But on the other hand, don't you think that we're required by God to give our best? He gave his son.
Yes, I
For
think there is a happy medium in there somewhere, slovenly versus the richest thing that you can impress people with. There's something in between there that befits Christianity. You're 100% right.
We all
Give our best.
within our means, but what we have within our means should be the best that we put on Sunday morning.
I think we give our, yes, and I think a lot of that, however, is something that has created by the culture, getting together in worship. We give our best every day, no matter what, but I think there's a point at which I like to think of it more this way. There is dressing for success is a real idea. I mean, it works. And one of the things that helps an individual, but more importantly, helps every other person to worship in a good setting, is to have everybody be concerned about their dress. That's just one of the things that's very important. I remember a buddy of mine telling me this. This actually happened. He was waiting on the table one Sunday with his buddy. And as they got in the back to walk back down the front, he told his buddy, he said, "You need to switch places with me." He said, "Why?" He said, "There's a girl over there wearing the shortest skirt I've ever seen. You'll want to see it." Well, now, there's a whole lot of problems in all that, a whole lot of problems. And we have to remember that there is a way in which our dress in these kind of situations affects positively and negatively others' ability to worship. When we have people standing up front, let's say, helping us worship by leading, by participating. Somebody gets up there with a t-shirt that's got a lot of writing on it, and I find myself trying to read it when I should be thinking about worship. I don't think guys have to wear shirt and ties, but I also don't want them wearing flip-flops and bathing suits, because while not wrong, it's not appropriate for what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. So the dress is very important, positively and negatively. Ellen? Yes. Putting on an appearance, making an appearance, maybe even coming in late so that everybody can see you parading yourself. That's the whole point of this passage. Parading yourself. That's what he's talking about.
He's talking about a wife here that has an unbelieving husband.
Yes.
And to me, he's just saying to that wife, you can dress yourself up and let your beauty shine, but that's not going to convert your husband.
Not at all. That's right.
It's going to be your inner person, your heart, that he sees day after day. Is what's when we so dress to attract the eyes of others, it's not always a good thing.
That's true.
My fault was I always dressed drab. I didn't have color. I didn't like babies, kind of blend in anywhere.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think that, I don't want people looking at me. For the most part, you would remember what I wear from one Sunday to the next.
Right.
It's not like somebody gets up a big, nice white suit up in front of us. I can remember that for a year. That was a nice suit. But it's not the appearance that we look for. Look from the
That's exactly true. That's what he's talking about.
You know, I've seen people that are beautiful people, not because of what they wear,
No.
because of what they, I tell you what, Al Morris and Doris, them people are beautiful.
Sure they are.
I don't care what, how they look, you know, how age is affecting or anything. That's just beauty.
That's very true, Kevin.
A while ago, you said the word cultural, and anybody who's been anywhere in the United States can see the cultural differences.
Oh, sure.
Within our own country.
Sure.
If you go to Florida, you don't see a tie.
Nope.
Anymore. I remember growing up, we weren't allowed to come to church on Sundays without a tie.
Uh-huh.
You know? I venture to guess that you would never even think about getting in the pulpit without a coat and tie.
That's very true.
Okay? Is it necessary? No, it's not necessary.
Nope.
But it's culturally accepted. You know, we went to Alaska. You know, it was very casual on Sunday morning. So it's not about the clothes. It's about what your attitude about your dress is. Now, if I'm dressing and you know, I'm not got any chance of dazzling anybody by the way I dress. I mean, I understand that. But there are some very attractive people.
Oh, yeah.
And they can really knock your socks off by the way they dress. Now, if that's the purpose for doing that, then they got a problem.
You're saying it exactly the way I think the text is laid out.
I've got a funny story about dressing. I went to Walmart for the post office years ago, and I walked in to service the vending machine, and there's this man checking out, and he's got on the full motorcycle gear. He's got the hat, the leather coat, zippers everywhere, chains everywhere, boots everywhere, and he's unzipping, getting his money out. Well, it didn't take me too long to finish the machine, and I leave, and I go get in my truck, and as I'm pulling out, there goes the same guy in front of me riding a little scooter. He's got all the gear in the world. He's riding a scooter.
That's good.
He spent all his money on maybe the wrong.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. He's looking the part until he gets on the, yeah. That's sort of like me in my golf game. I dress the part, but the game don't stay with it. That's right.
You know, I was just going to say, the idea of dress, you can err as easily on one side almost as the other.
You can.
The whole object is to show respect and to not draw attention to yourself, you know. And
Either way.
That's
exactly
right.
right.
I can imagine someone standing up front that had on just the finest suit you ever saw with rings on every finger and a big rose, or, you know, I'm just using that as an example. That would be just as distracting
Sure.
as someone up there in flip-flops and a T-shirt.
I
Writing on.
totally agree. You're 100% right. And that's the point of the passage.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Sarah. Sure. Okay. Sure. Mm-hmm. See, I think you bring up a great point, because when you start making this move into other areas, you take a person who has a creative house, some finery, some things they've done. Is that putting on a show? Well, not necessarily. So I think that it becomes an individual matter. I think the only person who can judge it is you. I don't think I have the right to look at you and to say, your attitude is wrong because the way you're dressed, I can tell you're just putting yourself on display. I can't do that, but you can do that. And that's why the text is written to the person, because one of the things to remember, and I talk about this in marriage counseling as well, there are passages that talk about a wife being submissive to a husband, that there's not one single passage that tells a husband to make his wife be submissive. In fact, we don't have that right. We have no right to do that. So it's an individual thing. You have to decide. You have to be. You have to choose. Howard?
Tell this story. The new deacon in Lexington, and one of the elders pulled me aside and said, "Yeah, you need to buy a suit." Why? He said, "You need to respect.
Yep.
And it's still.
I can understand that. How does he get to decide that? Again, that's his making that judgment call. I understand that.
You know, we kind of confined this to our appearance in church.
Right.
During the church service, but it also applies that when you're in Walmart or wherever you're.
I agree with you.
And, okay, now, if you want to define it or kind of hone it into just the church service, you want to see the most elaborate religious example of what it's talking about here. How many denominations does their priest stand up
That's
in robes?
good point.
And ropes around their neck and that type of thing. And that's exactly what he's talking about.
That's exactly right. That's a great point. It's an excellent point, Nancy.
And I think when we use the term of, presenting our best, well, maybe somebody's got a tux in their closet, or maybe I've got an evening gown. We don't step it up to that ultimate very best. So appropriate,
The word best, I think you're right. The word best doesn't mean the most expensive, the costly, the greatest looking. What it means is, who are you at your best? Dress that way. Who are you as a Christian at your best?
Been in church for many years. I have. There's a lot of difference now in style of dress to wear to church than my parents' generation. We become more casual. Not saying that's wrong, but that's just a cultural thing. My mother was always dressed to the hilt for the church.
Yes.
My dad.
Yes.
Hats and everything. And that's changed. I remember when it was frowned upon. I'm not picking on the women here, but when women, instead of wearing a dress to church, wore other apparel.
Oh, yeah.
It was, what is this? But now it's accepted and nobody thinks anything about it. So it's just a cultural thing. We don't need to get too carried away, make it too casual.
I think you're right, and I think that proves it, because back then it was not a matter of you dress this way so you can be seen. It was a way of saying, this is how we show our respect for God. Yeah, that's right. You guys, and then I got to close it out. Go.
Obviously, I think we have established that the appearance that you put on
Yep.
is important and that it's good for impressions and things like that. Your first impression, a lot of people look at you and the clothes you wear and things like that. But I think the more important part of this passage is the verse after, where it talks about how it doesn't matter what you wear, but what's in your heart.
That's
what
it.
matters, because fashion, it goes in and out. But here it talks about the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. And I think that sometimes we focus more on the clothes and what we wear and less about how people act and their attitudes and things like that. And
Oh, I think so. I think we put too much emphasis on the external. However, again, this passage, as you have identified, is written to you. It's written to you. It's to say, you take care of this. You monitor yourself. And we should be helping that by encouraging and talking about the inner person, not the outer person.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The emphasis that we place, as you can see by our discussion, is generally we place emphasis on the outward appearance.
That's exactly right.
And the point of these two verses is to change the way we think to where we're not worried about people's outward appearance.
That's right.
And the way you talked about that being a distraction and things not fitting our aim, I think just the way someone wearing flip-flops to serve on the Lord's table can not serve our aim, the same way as everyone requiring each other to dress up and look our best,
Or to have a tie.
could not serve our aim.
Yeah.
Because I've invited, I met a homeless man not too long ago, and I invited him to church, and he was concerned about his appearance and how he would be received if he came to church. That does not serve our aim.
Does not.
And that's a cultural thing.
Sure it is.
That we have allowed to affect us in that manner. So, in the same way, I mean, like he said, you can err either way.
It's a good reminder.
With our focus on external things, it doesn't serve our aim.
You're exactly right.
They show just about
I think the word is, yeah. I think the concept of modesty certainly includes, people ask me all the time, especially when I was doing a lot of youth rallies, and they would have these question and answer sessions, and they would always ask questions about dress. And I came up with this standard answer that I always give to women. And here's the answer. And generally it works. Don't get specific. Generally it works. If you got more skin showing than you got covered, you're heading in the wrong direction. And that way I was able to help them, you know. So modesty, appropriateness. And you guys didn't let me continue, but that's okay. We will pick it up and we will continue this hot button issue because we still got to talk to the husbands.